Supreme Court struck a major blow to the administrative state and the entire planet on Thursday, ruling that the Environmental Protection Agency does not have authority to cap carbon levels on an industry-wide basis. The case was West Virginia versus the EPA, and in a gut punch 6-3 ruling, the right-wing justices cling to a bogus legal theory to kneecap the environmental agency. Known as the Major Questions Doctrine, the court claimed that executive agencies can't engage in rulemaking in areas that Congress has not explicitly given them the power to do so. In this case, even though Congress named the agency the Environmental Protection Agency, and even though Congress gave it the explicit power to establish systems of pollution reduction, and even though greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide are a pollutant, the court ruled that the EPA cannot use its power to set state-level caps on carbon pollution. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote in the majority opinion, quote, "Capping carbon dioxide emissions at a level that will force a nationwide transition away from the use of coal to generate electricity may be a sensible solution to the crisis of the day. But it is not plausible that Congress gave EPA the authority to adopt on its own such a regulatory scheme. A decision of such magnitude and consequence rests with Congress itself or an agency acting pursuant to a clear delegation from that representative body." Congress created the EPA in 1970 before scientists knew to what extent human consumption of fossil fuels was contributing to global warming. In fact, Congress has established a bunch of regulatory agencies that are engaged in work that wasn't foreseeable at the time of their creation. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration was created in 1971. Since then, new and novel threats to workers on the job site have popped up that legislators couldn't have conceived of when they drafted the law. The SEC and FTC were created about 100 years ago, and since then, new services and financial products have come into existence. The court's ruling against the EPA can be stretched to invalidate all work the administrative state is doing that Congress hasn't explicitly given the authority for it to do so. Prior court precedent deferred to the agencies to interpret laws passed by Congress and determine what they can and cannot do. Thursday's ruling erases that and instead defers to the courts, which are now filled with reactionary monsters. This has major consequences for people who want clean air and water, a safe job site, and markets that aren't crashing every few years. Justice Elena Kagan wrote the dissent in the case, quote, "The subject matter of the regulation here makes the court's intervention all the more troubling. Whatever else this court may know about, it does not have a clue about how to address climate change. And let's say the obvious, the stakes here are high. Yet the court today prevents congressionally authorized agency action to curb power plants' carbon dioxide emissions. The court appoints itself, instead of Congress or the expert agency, the decision maker on climate policy. I cannot think of many things more frightening." It's pretty clear who benefits from the disintegration of the regulatory state. That's capital. And as the Lever News has reported, 5 of the 6 right-wing justices on the court who signed on to this opinion were installed to the court thanks to millions in dark money raised by Leonard Leo, the guy who founded the far-right Judicial Crisis Network in the early 2000s. Leo's funding network also helped put into office the Republican attorneys general across the U.S. who brought this case. Thursday's decision was the culmination of those efforts. The United States must now inform the world that it will not meet any of its commitments to reduce emissions to stave off global warming because its Supreme Court, paid for by extraction capitalists, won't let it. The good news is we are set to get a brief reprieve from the court for a few months. These were the final rulings before the justices go on recess until October. The bad news, when the new session of court returns, it looks set to deliver the death blow to whatever is remaining of U.S. democracy. Justices announced they would hear the case of Moore versus Harper, which could pave the way for partisan state legislatures to assert more control over federal elections. That could have massive ramifications on the 2024 elections, as states under the control of Republicans could rig the rules to ensure Democrats never get elected to national office, either through drawing partisan electoral maps or just straight up refusing to count certain ballots. This is a giant, flashing red warning sign to the Democratic Party. Either take on the power of the court today, or Joe Biden will be the last Democrat ever elected president. Hey, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our new videos. Also, if you want to see Means Morning News in its complete form, not just the clips we post here, head on over to Means TV and get access to all our new episodes and our entire backlog, plus tons of other great movies and original TV shows.